Good evening, everyone. It is time for today's Tax Talk. I'm your host. I'm Attorney Stephen Leahy. It is Thursday, February 17th, the year of our Lord 2022. And we've been talking a lot about the IRS recently and their changes and how they're behind in a lot of things. They're behind in processing. They're behind. They've stopped the notices. And today, the IRS announced that they're going to start a second surge to help those. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Won't you join us? So, here I am, Attorney Stephen Leahy. It's my second shot today since I recorded an episode earlier and didn't put the sound on. How did that happen? I don't know. That's what happens when you produce your own show, and that's what I'm doing. So again, today we're going to talk about the IRS and the surge. They had a hearing today on Capitol Hill in the Senate, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And so let me make sure that I have the right stories up because that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the IRS. So again, we've talked about the letters not going out. The IRS is stopping the letters. The Taxpayer Advocate came out last month with a report that said the IRS is in crisis. The commissioner of the IRS has come out and said the IRS is in crisis. And so they're trying to do whatever they can to improve at least the image of the IRS. I don't know if it's going to improve the numbers any, but they want to improve the image. And that's really paramount to them. Excuse me. But first, let's talk about. First, let's do the story. This shouldn't be there. Okay. So let's do the first story. Back to the story. The IRS is tapping a second surge team as Backlog now lumps in 2022 tax returns. Okay, the IRS said it's temporarily reassigning 1,200 staffers and pausing certain notices. We talked about that. You know, people were getting notices in the mail, and those notices were saying, "Hey, taxpayer, you haven't filed your tax return." And the taxpayer said, "Well, I filed my tax return on time. You took my money, but you haven't processed the return." And because these things go out automatically and it hasn't been processed, the IRS says, "Hey, well, we don't have your tax return." And so people were getting agitated about this. And in order to stop that, the IRS promised to stop sending out these notices. So 2 weeks ago, the Internal Revenue Service said it was reassigning 1,200 staffers as a surge team of reinforcements tasked with cutting into the backlog that included millions of unprocessed returns from last year. Now it's calling in even more reinforcements as the pending paperwork begins, including returns filed this year. The IRS is working quickly to engage a second surge team to help alleviate inventory backlog and best serve taxpayers, the agency said in a statement Thursday. The IRS said it is exploring every avenue to help reduce inventory of tax returns while working to have a strong filing season. Sounds like bureaucratic ease to me. The agency has also halted certain notices to try tamping down on taxpayer aggravation. It's not immediately clear how many people are included in the second wave of reinforcements. They probably don't know. They just know that the first wave wasn't enough. The first wave of reassignments was an important first step, Erin Collins, the IRS's National Taxpayer Advocate, said at a Senate hearing on Thursday. We're going to have a little clip from that in just a moment. The second wave provides additional resources on the processing challenges, she said. To be clear, Collins says it's going to be a challenge. As of early February, the IRS had 23.5 million tax returns and correspondence that had been manually processed. This includes 3.1 million paper returns already received in 2022. They can move all these employees over. It's still going to be a very time-consuming challenge, Collins told senators. Well, they have to be trained. You can't just you can't just put new people in a job and think it's going to work, because they don't know how to do the job. So they have to be trained, and that's going to take time in and of itself. Simply putting bodies there is not enough. What's at stake isn't, now that beats not putting bodies there, and I agree with that. What's at stake isn't a mere paper push for an agency that had almost 82,000 employees in fiscal 2021. People and businesses are depending on the IRS to process the long pending returns and often to send along much needed refunds. Throughout Thursday's hearing, senators reiterated that they kept hearing from constituents with refunds were snagged in the backlog. The backlog dates back to the pandemic's early phases when the IRS temporarily closed its operations. They all stayed home, like all of us. That put the agency behind the 8 ball during 2 years where it's had to juggle the distribution of stimulus checks, child tax credit payments, and tax code changes. All of this added to the problem. We talk about the physical, the paper returns, and they're going to talk about it here in this, not in this story. So I wanted to show you what I wanted to do is show you who this taxpayer advocate is. We talk a lot about her on this show, and so I thought, well, maybe it would be interesting for us to show who she was. So let us let me pull her up, make sure we have it up, and let's show it. Here we go.
You recently visited the Kansas City Processing Center. Can you please share a few brief observations?
This is the
from
taxpayer advocate. She's going to testify.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Here she is.
I think, as we talk about paper all the time, and I've, commented, paper's not the IRS's friend, paper's the IRS's kryptonite.
I showed
But
this
when you're
video
physically in the room and you see the mounds and the piles
returns
of those
I'm
returns
do it
sitting
in the
there.
probably next week.
When I was looking at it, I was looking at individuals, small businesses, companies. These are returns crying out saying, please process
also
me.
Because of the IRS
and it was very much looking at
always need more money.
The IRS. We should be a very high-tech tax administration, but we were pretty much. I was appalled as to how much we manually do. We have a manual processing from it to arrive at the docks all the way to processing. To they separate checks from the envelopes. They remove staples. They hand stamp. They move the return all the way through by humans. We should have that automated. It should not be in the condition that it's in.
Okay, so there she is. This is again, Ms. Collins is the IRS taxpayer advocate. I wanted you to know who she was and see her at the hearing today. Now, there's this story here. There's another story. The IRS is in the headlines. That is not a good thing. That is, here, let me put that up. That's true. So let's put it up again. There we go. The IRS is in the headlines. That is not a good thing. And it's never, right? The IRS is supposed to work in the background. We're not supposed to have it in the news every day. But they have been in the news every day for a long time now. So here's another story. Senator Todd, that was the senator who was questioning Ms. Collins. So I wanted to show that, and he has a post here about it and how his constituents are complaining. And that's why he wanted to question her. Here's another story. Let's go to the top here. The IRS chief, we're facing enormous challenges, this tax fund. So this is Charles Rettig. Here is Charles Rettig. This is him. I wanted you to know who he is, see his face. He is the IRS commissioner. So the top man at the IRS. This is him. And so this is a story that he wrote 2 days ago, February 15th. As the IRS begins this tax season, it continues to face enormous challenges. Our dedicated workforce has done everything it can to prepare for filing day on April 18th. Remember, the 15th is on a Friday. It's a holiday, Emancipation Day. So this year, I should say, the IRS deadline is April 18th and not the 15th. Our immediate focus is on simplifying the taxpayer's filing experience by streamlining the process, answering as many questions as possible, and reducing our historic inventories. Today, millions of people are still waiting for their prior year's returns to be processed and refund checks to arrive in the mail while preparing for their upcoming tax filing. While we can't immediately solve these significant issues, our employees are doing everything they can, and I am committed to returning to normal inventory levels before next year. I think that's an empty promise, in my opinion. The IRS is operating without stable multi-year funding in place. I have to disagree with the commissioner here. They have fables. Do you know what the budget of the IRS is? I ask people this all the time. Their budget is $14 billion a year. Plus, this last year they had extra money because of COVID. They got extra funding because they had extra jobs. Now, I'm not saying they have extra work, and I get that. And a lot of these paper returns, they're not prepared for, because now 95% of all tax returns are done electronically. And he's going to mention this here, how much easier it is on the IRS to do things electronically. And that's why their budget hasn't gone up. And they complain about it. They say that's why they're having a problem, because their budget isn't big enough. They get $14 billion a year. I just wanted to point that out. I think it's important. Okay. The IRS is operating without a stable multi-year funding in place, which creates additional impediments to our efforts to deal with our current situation. However, we have taken extraordinary measures to work through unprocessed returns and correspondence, not in a timely fashion, including mandatory overtime by IRS employees, creating and redirecting surge teams to address the inventories. Again, today they announced the second surge teams. Temporarily suspending certain automated compliance notices. We talked a lot about that on this show. And where possible, modernizing operating systems to accelerate the manual processing of inventories. COVID hit us all while facing consequential resource challenges as a result of chronic underfunding. Again, I have to disagree with the commissioner. They don't have chronic underfunding. The IRS worked as hard as possible while taking on a significant increase in responsibilities. That I will agree with him. They have taken on different additional responsibilities. They did get additional funding. Was it enough? Obviously, it was not enough. While also facing unprecedented challenges from the pandemic. It has been my privilege to lead the IRS since 2018 as we have worked through the successful delivery of more than $1.5 trillion in refunds, stimulus payments, and advance payments of child tax credits, all during an excruciating pandemic. Through our work, we touch more Americans than any other private or public sector organization, and we are deeply proud to serve our country. Well, that's true, right? What other organization hits everybody? Because everybody has to pay their taxes. For the current tax season, the IRS workforce has already delivered more than 4 million refunds worth nearly $10 billion through February 4th, all electronic. Okay? If they were done electronically, they're done without any IRS employees. Yet millions are waiting for their returns to be processed, and many won't be able to reach us when they call with questions for this filing season. 1 in 9 phone calls are answered. This is frustrating for taxpayers and for us. We want to do more, but we face major challenges. Here it is. Over the past decade, the IRS budget has been cut by nearly 20%. It hasn't really been cut. It just hasn't increased enough for inflation. So they didn't cut it 20%. It just hasn't risen enough to offset in 10-year dollars. Then it's down 20%. But in actual money, it is not down 20%. The agency today has had few employees as it did in the 1970s. Again, I could tell you that the number of employees it takes to process returns, that's where the bulk of their work was, as he's telling us now. 95% of all tax returns are now done electronically. They don't need as many people, despite a 60% increase in the United States population during the time and an unprecedented increase in responsibilities. While more than 90% of the 860 million individual returns are filed electronically, as he acknowledges, the remaining people who file on paper lead to millions of time-intensive manually processed paper returns. So that's what he's saying, right? So when we used to be 100% done manually, well, we can see why it took so many more people. But now they're done electronically, and it doesn't take that many people. There are tangible consequences to American taxpayers who aren't able to receive the level of service they deserve, as well as the IRS's ability to enforce tax laws. And here it is again, for the ultra-wealthy tax cheats. I have to say, I think the vast majority of the ultra-wealthy are not tax cheats. That's just false, in my opinion. Last year, the IRS received 120 million calls on certain phone lines during filing season. At times, calls came in at a rate of 1,500 per second, but our limited workforce was able to answer fewer than 20%. It's more like 99% during the tax season. Over the last several years, staffing for taxpayer assistance centers decreased so dramatically that less than a third as many taxpayers are able to receive face-to-face assistance from the IRS than they were in 2016. There are a lot more questions because they changed the tax law, and the tax laws create questions by the public, and the public wants answers, and the only one they can get the answers from is the IRS, but they can't get the answers from the IRS because they won't answer the phone. There are several ways, and then they file a return because they can't get them on the phone, and then it's wrong, and then it has to be processed manually. And this is just a round robin, a circle. There are several ways people can ensure a smoother filing process this year. Filing electronically with the direct deposit can avoid processing delays. Absolutely, that's true. Refund delays and later IRS notices. Taxpayers should pay extra attention if they receive economic impact payments or on child tax credit in 2021. The IRS has sent out more than 150 million information letters this year. This will help assure information is reported accurately. The reality at the IRS is that we know we need to do better. You think so? We're committed to doing better, and we are trending in a positive direction. At least that's their testimony, and they're going to stick to it. Our employees are doing everything they can, but we need help. More money? As many IRS leaders have stated for the most of the past decade, without long-term predictable funding, there it is, the IRS will continue to be hamstrung, failing to provide the experience that taxpayers deserve. So it's our fault as taxpayers for not giving them enough money. I just think it's false. It's a false reckoning. But anyway, I think they have enough money. They get $14 billion a year. So that's just my opinion. Now, remember, I'm going to ask you to like and share our content, like and share it, subscribe to the channel. We need your help to get this information out. Who else is telling you about IRS news every day? I don't think there's anybody else out there. And remember, most news is really the core of that news is IRS news. How do they tax you? How do they spend it? So, and as he mentioned, the IRS has the most contact with everybody in our society, private or public. Okay, so that's why this news is so important. So help us get the news out by liking and subscribing to our channel. Also, remember, if you're fighting the IRS, what's the first thing you got to do? How do you learn? Well, you get a copy of my book. First thing you do, get a copy of my book, Deal with Your IRS Problem Today. Deal with your IRS problem today. Go to freeirsbook.com, freeirsbook.com, get yourself a copy. So thanks so much for joining us here today. Now remember, tomorrow is Friday. We have the Watch Talk Radio podcast beginning at about 2:15. So find out who our guest is, and I'm not going to tell you because you can join. You got to join us tomorrow at 2:15. So thanks so much for joining us. I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, and thanks again for being here.